Good morning. When studying the law, several things merit our attention. What is the foundation of law? For us in this nation, it's the Constitution, the fundamental law upon which all others rest and are measured. Is the law made democratically by elected representatives, or is it the whim of a tyrant? Does the law enjoy the support of the people who must live under its limits on our freedom? Is there a system that allows disputes over law to be settled in an organized fashion? With the judicial branch of government, you know that there is. A necessary element of our system is law enforcement, because although every citizen bears responsibility personally, over time in our history, trained professionals are the ones who in most instances enforce our code of laws, not the angry mob, not certainly vigilantes. This brings us to the person who singularly personifies that profession, this morning's guest speaker. In organizing this event, I challenged you to write a question that will be posed to our guest. I said that you can ask a challenging question so long as you are respectful. That expectation has been met. And although not every question can be asked this morning, I'll be forwarding all of your questions to his office. There I hope they'll be reviewed because they provide insight on the issues that matter to you, and your voice is lit. Today is a special day in the history of our school. We have with us a visitor who deserves the welcome that only Blue Devil Nation can provide. Colonel Christopher Mason is the first superintendent of the Massachusetts State Police to visit our campus. Colonel Mason is a graduate of the University of Massachusetts with a degree in environmental sciences. He holds a Master of Criminal Justice degree from Anna Maria College. He became a state trooper in 1993, and over the course of his career has progressed steadily through that organization's ranks until, in 2019, Governor Charlie Baker appointed him Superintendent of State Police with the rank of Colonel. He commands an organization of over 2,200 employees, the largest law enforcement agency in New England. It's one of the oldest state enforcement agencies in the nation, with a history reaching back to the 1860s. Like virtually no time in American history, law enforcement today faces challenge upon challenge. There are controversial issues and there are controversies. This division among too many of our fellow citizens and the sense of disconnect is yet another challenge. The procedure this morning is the Colonel will be giving an overview, and then your questions will be read by your classmates, either David or Janelle. With his impeccable record as a law enforcement veteran, the respect he has earned from counterparts in other states, his understated, steadfast demeanor, I respectfully suggest that the Commonwealth is fortunate indeed to have Colonel Christopher Mason at the helm of our state police. Blue Devil Nation welcomes the man who is known as the Colonel.
Thank you very much for the invitation to speak today. A couple things that I just want to get right out in front of. At first, when I walked in and I saw the poster, I was a little taken back. I was like, wow, this is going to be a tough crowd to win over. They're already calling me Blue Devil. And my chief of staff grabbed me and said, no, that's their mascot. I'm not referring to you as the Blue Devil yet. So I was like, all right, I'm on good footing. I can still have an hour to win them over. So I'm really looking forward to having this conversation. And I want to thank all the staff here. I also want to give a shout out They tried to lure me into eating some donuts back and some pastry out back. Wouldn't have any part of it. I wasn't going to feed into that stereotype. But I do appreciate the free coffee. I will take that. So thank you very much to your culinary staff, and thank you to your graphics department for the beautiful poster. Really enjoyed it. So I just wanted to come today and have a kind of a frank, candid conversation with you about some of the questions that you may have. I'm willing to take them all on. I really enjoy this kind of give and take, particularly with younger crowds. I have opportunity to speak quite a bit. I speak to the legislator. I testify up at the Hill, at the State House in Boston from time to time on various issues concerning police reform, the status of the state police. But where I think is really important for me to hear is from the community. So these are the conversations that I love to have the most. Let me just talk to you a little bit about the state police. I can go on for days and days. I love this job. This job is the best. I told my wife, it's the best thing that ever happened to me. Everything good in my life has come from this job. It's been an incredible experience. I know that I'm on the back end of my career, but it has given me so much. It's been just such a rewarding and challenging career. And then to cap it off with having an opportunity with the Colonel of Massachusetts State Police is something that I'd never ever in my life envisioned. But now that I'm here, I really treasure every day that I get to be in this role. And I have an opportunity to work with some very fine people, do something very important work, and I really enjoy coming to work every day. So having an opportunity to speak to you today is just part of that enjoyment. So let me tell you about the mission of the Massachusetts State Police and what it is we do, and then I'll talk about how we do it and some of the why we do it. So really for the state police, we have a defined mission. Our mission is to work in partnership with our local communities to provide public safety. That's the very simple part of our mission. We kind of do that in two different ways. As you know, and have probably seen, you've seen troopers, you've seen the two-tone blue cars up on the highways. We refer to them as a bluebird or a sled. Those are the nicknames that we have. So when you go get a new cruiser, you get a new sled. It's just kind of the job talk. But you've seen them out on the roadways, and they're doing some important work. They're out there to try and provide for safer roadways. So one of the basic tenets of our country is that we want to provide for a safe environment so that you can enjoy life, liberty, and pursue happiness. And we recognize that the roadways, the interstate highways, that's how you get to work, that's how you get to school, that's how you visit your friends, your loved ones. We want to make that a safe experience for everybody. So we are an agency that's very much focused on highway safety, and then your local policing is done by whatever town that you live in this county, Leominster. You'll rely on LPD to do that for you. And then we assist them and augment them with a number of different ways, resources that we can bring in, leadership that we can provide, assistance, support, all of that we can provide to local communities. And then the other way we kind of provide for the overarching public safety goal is through investigation. So we have a number of investigative units. They're tasked with doing long-term investigations. What a lot of people don't know is that the Massachusetts State Police, with the exception of some metro communities such as Boston, Pittsfield, Springfield, and Worcester, we're responsible for the investigation of all homicides. So if a homicide occurs in a community, it'll be the state police that's responsible for conducting that homicide investigation. And then we also conduct death investigations. So what do I mean by that? A death investigation is somebody passes away unattended at their house, so not in the traditional manner that you would think. Somebody goes to the hospital and a medical person pronounces them deceased. This is somebody that dies, at their home or at a park or somewhere. We refer to it as an unattended death. We have the responsibility to investigate those. Why do we take such time to investigate that? Family members want to know what the circumstances are to that death. They want to know how their loved one has passed away. What were the underlying circumstances underneath that death? And they want to be assured that there's nothing unnatural about it. They want to ensure that there's no foul play, that there's nothing suspicious about the death, and they want answers. And so we step into that breach and we try to provide those answers to the extent that we can to those families. We also try to provide and fight crime through education. That's a critical component of what we do. It's getting out in the communities, getting on media, utilizing social media to highlight, public safety threats, concerns, and share that information out so that the public is better informed and that they have an idea of where the threats exist and what the concerns of the day are, so that they can mitigate against those. And then, again, we fall back very much on patrol. So being a visible presence within the communities, out on the highways across the Commonwealth, that's one of the things that we do and speaks to the heart of our mission. So the other important component that we do, and that is not often seen, is, and I referred to it earlier, is that we provide critical leadership and resources during its major incidents. So think natural disasters, so like hurricanes, tornadoes, flooding. You'll see the state police step into that gap where local resources and capabilities don't exist. They don't have the manpower to surge to that level, and we will step in and we will augment them. We have a number of departments that right now are going through critical staffing issues. So I can think of a town right near here that has issues with staffing, and so they've reached out to the Massachusetts State Police and said, listen, we're having a hard time filling all 3 shifts, providing public safety for our community. Can you send troopers into the community to assist? And we do. And so we'll be there for a very short period of time until they rectify their staffing issues, they get some new people on board, they get them through their training process, and then they'll be good to go. And that's something that happens from time to time across the Commonwealth, and we're there to assist. We just concluded a Western Mass initiative where we were in the cities of Springfield, Holyoke, and Chicopee. They had a very real uptick in street violence, and we were there to help them for a 2-3 month period of time. In those affected areas, we go in, we assist the locals, we integrate with their community policing program, we try to fight crime, and then we're out, and then it's back in the hands of the locals. So we have that surge capability, we have those resources to really assist when necessary. We also come in, we just saw it recently, in the wake of the George Floyd incident out in Minnesota. We saw a lot of civil unrest, and that civil unrest percolated across the Commonwealth. We weren't immune to that. So you saw issues in Boston, you saw issues in Northampton, you saw issues in Springfield, on other communities. Those communities oftentimes do not have the resources or the training or the equipment to handle that type of incident. And so the state police has a lot of experience dealing with mass gatherings, public events, large venues, and so we are able to step into that and provide a template that will allow for people to come out and safely protest, safely have their right to free speech, safely exercise their right to peacefully gather. And so we want to be there to facilitate that. Even if that criticism is coming back on us, that's our role. You're there to provide for the public safety. So that's just another example of kind of the stuff that we do in the background. So how do we accomplish all of that? So the state police is organizationally, it's a paramilitary organization. So we have a rank structure. It begins with the colonel and it ends with trainee. So when you come into the Massachusetts State Police Academy, you attain the rank of trainee. And then if you can successfully manage the academy, you can complete the academy, you meet all the requirements that are set forth in the academy, you graduate, you attain the rank of trooper. And then from trooper, then there's a progression through the ranks. So trooper, sergeant, lieutenant, then there's a rank of detective lieutenant, captain, detective captain, major, lieutenant colonel, and then colonel. So that is the way we operate, much like the military. It's not the military, so that's where that phrase paramilitary comes out. Orders are issued down. They're issued down by the colonel. Personnel orders, disciplinary orders, operational orders, all those are issued down. They're positive orders, and those are issued out. You're expected as members of the state police to follow those orders. We live by a set of policies and procedures that define and kind of bracket what we do, and they set the expectations for the officers that are out in the field so that they know what are their guardrails. In other words, good if I'm in between these areas. We're guided, of course, by the Constitution. In addition to that, to the case law, in addition to our policies and procedures, which mimic and incorporate that case law. So there's a lot to it. As an organization, we're broken up into divisions. We kind of specialize within each division. So we have the most visible component of the state police, which are the people that wear this uniform, and you see them every day out on the roadways. That's the Division of Field Services. So that's think of that as our patrol branch. That averages around between 1,500 and 1,700 people. Right today, as we stand here, we have 2,229 sworn members of the Massachusetts State Police. In addition to that, we have about 700 civilian employees. So people working in administration, in fleet services. Remember, we have 2,200 cruisers that are out there running every day. So it's quite an operation. We have aircraft mechanics. We have civilian staff working in the labs, DNA chemists, criminalists, people that are experts in making fingerprint identification. All of those people combined, and as a team, we all come together to create that public safety mission or delivery to people of the Commonwealth. So, in addition to field services, we have the Division of Investigative Services, or DIS. So think of that as your detective branch. So they specialize in those death investigations, homicide investigations, serious crimes, rapes. Everything you see in the headlines, that's what they do. In addition to the Division of Investigative Services, we have the Division of Homeland Security. So they are kind of our both the more domestic and international terrorism threats are handled by that division. So that embedded within that division is our cybercrime unit. So that's a very busy unit. They are highly specialized. As you can imagine, being able to do forensics, be able to do investigations that exist in the internet world, in the cyber world, is a very difficult, very technical, very painstaking endeavor. And we're fortunate that we have people that really have those skill sets. And that is a very difficult job, as you can imagine. So the bulk of that work that they do in the cyber world is, unfortunately, with child exploitation. And I'm sad to tell you that is a business that, if I have, and I'm making the numbers up, if I have 25 people in the cyber unit, I can double that tomorrow to 50 people, and they still wouldn't be out of work. They would just rise to the level. There's so much of that going on the internet, and this pandemic that we've just gone through, or are still going through in many respects, has only exacerbated that. So people are now at home. What are they doing? They're living in the cyber world. They're on their computers all the time, and so that provides additional opportunities for fraud within the cyber world. The exchange, people that are into the exchange, distribution, creation of child pornography, all of that, exploitation, human trafficking, all those things that occur and are facilitated through the internet, we're required to have basically a cyber unit of virtual detectives that are out there working the internet every day to combat that crime. So that's an important part of the DHS. The other really important part of DHS, the Department of Division of Homeland Security, is our Joint Terrorism Task Force. So we've gone kind of through a cycle, and you see the pendulum swing within the public and within policing on what is the focus of the day. And remember, after 9/11, there very much was a focus on terrorism. And now that we're all focused on COVID, we're focused on police reform and all these other things, don't forget that terrorism still exists, and that is a very real threat that still exists. We still have to calculate that in to our operations plans. We've seen examples of where things can go very wrong very quickly and have deadly results. So I'll point to, just think to the recent Christmas stroll where the vehicle went through the crowd, parade, and a number of people were killed. We still think about that when we're planning out large events, even when people are engaged in protests or First Amendment gatherings. We just went through the October hosting of the Boston Marathon. We're always thinking about those potential threats. And so we're thinking about how do we block off the course for the marathon? How do we position sand trucks, snow plows, vehicles, barricades to prevent somebody from using a vehicle as a weapon? So terrorism still exists. Terrorism is still a very real threat, and it's something that the Joint Terrorism Task Force works on. And I'm very proud of the work they do. or not. It's an amazing world to be in. I had an opportunity to work in that realm for about 2 years. I was fortunate enough to be the director of the Fusion Center here in the Commonwealth, and it amazes me, and I think people would be astounded at the work of Massachusetts State Troopers here in the Commonwealth. Remember, a source of information is a source of information, so whether they're providing you information on crime, on drugs, or on terrorism, we have people in the Commonwealth that have traveled from other countries that have information relative to terrorism activities that are being conducted overseas. So, I know that Massachusetts State Troopers are working those sources of information. So, a Massachusetts State Trooper here in the Commonwealth can literally be working a source here in the Commonwealth, deriving information, passing that information on to either DOD, CIA sources, passing that information on, and then that information becomes actionable in another country, like Afghanistan, Iraq. So it's really amazing to see the connection between the Commonwealth and these other countries and the work that gets done. Work that doesn't get a lot of attention over here, but is important work that we do every day. So I've talked about DFS, I've talked about DIS, DHS. We have a Division of Administrative Services. They just basically keep the wheels rolling on the cruisers. Somebody's got to work out, how do you fix these cars? How do you keep them running? How do you order new ones? Who gets the copy paper? Who gets the toner? All of the things that make the state police click. How do we get paid? Fiscal, payroll, all of those things. So a lot of, as the name connotes, a lot of the administrative services are there. One of the other divisions we have is the Division of Standards and Training. They run our academy, and they are the overarching division that runs all of our training. So we are unique that we have our own academy. So many times local police departments will go to the municipal police training academies, and they'll all come together. We're large enough that we can run academy classes on our own. We have a facility out in Braintree, Massachusetts. It's our standalone academy. We're very proud of it. We continue to make investments there. We have a range. We have a simulated house there. We have a mobile environment, virtual environment that we can operate in out there. We have a little community that's built out there for us to train in. And so we're very proud of the quality of training that we get. It's one of the themes that, as a colonel, that I've come back to time and time again, is that we just can't do enough training. It's been my mantra because this is a game where we're making decisions that are literally life and death and require split-second decisions. So we want that decision-making to be as sound as possible. We want officers to be confident in their decisions. We want them to make informed decisions. We want them to make the right decision. I don't expect and I don't demand from any of my people perfection. I know I'm not going to get that. We're dealing with people. I don't expect them to be perfect. I don't expect my people to be perfect. But I expect them to have made, if they make a mistake, they make the wrong decision. I expect it to be a decision of the head, not of the heart. Meaning that they just miscalculated and made a wrong decision, a wrong error in judgment. The Division of Standards and Training is involved in helping me do that. So within the Division of Standards and Training, in addition to the academy, they also have our internal affairs. So they investigate misconduct, they investigate when something goes wrong. They're the people that I rely on to give me the ground truth and tell me, we conducted an investigation, this is what it is, here's the investigation. And then now it's incumbent upon the colonel in his or her role to then exercise discipline. So that's kind of the layout of the Massachusetts State Police. I know it's a lot to take in, but it's a great job. We love it. It's a once-in-a-lifetime experience. You get to see things that you never really ever thought you'd see, both good and bad. It gives you a whole new appreciation for this world that we live in. But I could ramble on forever. Why don't we start and get to some of the questions that I know. Get some of the points that you're interested in, to what interests you.
Good morning, Colonel Mason. Welcome to Leominster High School. My name is David Keefe. We will be reading questions that our classmates have submitted. When we identify them, the student will stand, who will read their question, and invite you to respond. There may be follow-up questions, and you are welcome to ask questions as well.
So the first question was asked by Josh Yon.
Hello?
So much weight on it? In your opinion, what should be done to improve the public safety for the community? The distance from all of the
Thank you for the question. I'll let you off the hook. You don't have to stand through my entire answer. Thank you. So when I look at the police community or police-public relationship, I view it kind of as I do every relationship that I've ever had in my life. So I want you to think about the relationships that you have, relationships that you have with your friends, your parents, with your teachers, and it always comes down to kind of two things, in my view. Number one is trust. You have to establish trust. And number two is communication. So that's easy to say. I fixed the police-public relations problem. I just told you all we have to do is just develop and engender trust and exercise more communication. So I'll drop the mic and walk out now. But you're going to call me out on it. You're going to say, yeah, that's great, Colonel, but how do you get there? How do you do that? That's easy to say, but how do you actually do it? So let me start with trust. So I think, the best way that you build trust between two people is you want it. It's one thing to say it, to talk the talk, but you got to then walk it. So you're going to be measured by your performance. How do you do? And so very much that's the way I want the Massachusetts State Police to be measured. I want the good work that we do to be out there. I want it to be available to the public. I want them to know. But I also know that I can't hide the things that go wrong. If there's misconduct on our job, we live to a very high standard here on the state police. And so we have to address that. We have to address that in as timely a fashion as we can. And I'll be candid with you. Sometimes I'm frustrated at how I can do that. There's a concept called due process, and the unions hold very close to that. And so oftentimes, I can't act as fast as I can when I perceive misconduct on the state police. But I'll get there. I always get there eventually. And so really, I think, through our performance, being out there, doing good work, and reflecting that good work is how we start to build that trust. The other component to that is the communication. And we're not going to have this trust between us if we don't start to communicate. If we don't start to listen and hear from our communities what they want, what their expectations are. It is not my job to say to you, hey, this is how we're going to do policing in your community. We have to have that conversation. We have to set those expectations up front. We're going to use intelligence-led policing. We're going to use data to target our resources. We're not going to come over and we're just not going to target everybody in the room. We know who the prolific offenders are. We know who is committing crimes within the community. Do we want to just target just those people? And do we want to do it in a way that is fair, impartial, doesn't rely on race, gender, socioeconomic status? Of course, that's exactly what we want to do. We have to have that conversation. We have to understand how that's going to work. We want to employ a community-based approach to public safety. We want to go back to broken windows. We have to have those conversations. And it's only when we have those conversations and you understand what the police do, the police have a better understanding of what the community does, and they get to actually know each other. So that the police officers don't view the community as somebody that they have to take care of, that they have to enforce the law upon, that they begin to view themselves as guardians of that community, and that they view themselves as a partner in the community to provide for public safety, and that this is a shared responsibility among all of us. I think those are the ways that we start to build trust. From the police perspective, I know that we've been focused on getting out and doing more community engagement. We have a number of ways we do that within the state police. We have basketball leagues. We have the police athletic league that we get out. We have various community events that we go. This summer we hosted young females came into the state police headquarters and we hosted a STEM camp so that they had an opportunity to come in and interact with police officers, predominantly female troopers, so that they got to see that, hey, there are female troopers. Hey, there's somebody that is modeling the way, and I can have a career in law enforcement. Or maybe I don't want to wear the uniform, but I want to work in the lab. I'd love to do DNA work. I'd love to go out and be a criminalist and go into crime scenes and collecting evidence. That's my gig. And I understand that a science-based approach for me is the science part of law enforcement is the role that I want to be in. And so for providing those opportunities, or even just opening the door and saying, hey, this is what we're all about, this is what we do, I think, provides opportunities for people to think about a career in state police. And even if they don't think about a career in state police, they have a better understanding. So that understanding is and also those interactions help us in a myriad of ways. We hear, and Ms. Lafayette spoke to it earlier, even the questions that you're going to ask today will give me some insight on what your concerns are. And I'll take those concerns back to headquarters and we calculate those, and those help inform my decisions as a colonel as we move forward and start to lay out strategic strategies on where the state police is going. So that's my long way of answering that question. I hope I answered your question. Close enough? All right.
Alex Miller has asked, Colonel, how do you see the state police force in 10 years in terms of strategy, numbers, and technology? Will there be more or less troopers?
So with respect to the first part of it, my question. So with respect to strategy, I spoke a little earlier about this notion of us having core values on the state police. And those are, again, something that's printed out, it's codified within our policy procedure. It's one of our first policies. So every trooper knows, they know what our values are, and they know what our mission is. And so as various changes come about, and I alluded to some of them, there was a time where violent crime back before 2015 was, was really out of control in the early 90s. That was really our focus: street crime, murder, homicide. That was where we were at, because that was the demand of the day. And then times shifted, and then 9/11 occurred, and then now there was a focus on domestic and international terrorism. And so we kind of all shifted to that. And then now you start to see a different thing. And so what is the emerging threats now? So you now throw on top of that, you have this whole cyber world that we live in. So the frauds that are perpetrated on the internet, scams, the exploitation of people occurring on the internet, that's a burgeoning area. All the new development of technology is really something that we have struggled to keep up with. So the development of cell phones, everything being on cell phones, people's lives, evident. How does the cell phone? We see the cell phone as a source of evidence. You see it as everything is on your life is on the cell phone. So how do we get there? How do we, if we need to get into a cell phone, how do we do it in a constitutional way? What are the steps? Understanding the search warrants, the probable cause, limitations. Can you get into a phone? If you can't get into a phone, technically, because some phones you're not going to be able to get into, how far can you go? So really that policy procedure is what guides our strategy. And I suspect that will remain fairly consistent over time. It served us well, this overarching public safety mission and mindset. But as society evolves, we will have to evolve, we will have to change. And it is a very dynamic job. And we're required to keep pace with the changes. As far as technology, that is something that we struggle with on the state police to keep up with. The technological changes are so fast. Think about what's happening just in the world. People are communicating now on encrypted cell phones, on encrypted apps, where traditionally they were on phones. And so if we had court-authorized ability to do it, we could wiretap the phone. And now none of that happens. So drug cartels, drug distribution agencies are operating on encrypted apps. And so much of what we used to have visibility into from an investigative standpoint, we no longer have that insight in there just because of the development of technology. Now it's in the minds of some people, they're like, great. In the minds of other people, they're like, that's a bad thing. And you might think this is a great development. You can't see anything, the government can't see anything into my phone. It's great until maybe you're a victim. Maybe your loved one is killed. And we say, hey, we think that this person has evidence of that homicide on this phone. We can't get it. So now there's a space that we've traditionally never had. There's a space that's immune to search warrants. We can't get it. We can't order Apple to crack the phone open. So it can be frustrating in that way. So dealing with all these technologies will certainly continue to be a challenge. And I'll loop this question back to the first question, where we build trust. So we have to have very real conversations, we, the police, and the public, and our society at large, have to have conversations about these new developments in technology. The developments in technologies are frequently outpacing our policies and procedures and our common understanding or expectations about what we should be able to get. Should I be able to get into your private messages? Should I be able to read your email? What does it take for me to subpoena your email? What level of probable, I have to have probable cause, I have to have reasonable suspicion. All these technologies are developing, and we have to have a conversation about what we want to do. So I can put a camera in every hallway here, and I can start to utilize facial recognition. I can start to use AI. I can build pattern of life. I can start to identify who your friends are. We can start to do all that stuff from a technological standpoint. We could do that. Do we want to do that? That's the better question. Just because the police can do something, the question is, should we allow the police to do that? And we as the public, we as the police, and I say we as the police because we are members of your community. We live and work in your communities. We have the same concerns about government overreach, which is hard for people to hear sometimes from the girl. They look at me like, what do you mean? You are the government. And I'm like, well, you should be concerned about government overreach. You should always be an advocate for your privacy and your security. But recognize that there's a balancing act. This is all good to be very protective of these concepts. But then how does that impact law enforcement's ability to solve crimes on your behalf? So those are all important conversations that we have to have. The technological advances within policing are amazing. From new body armor to body-worn cameras to GPS trackers in the cruisers to just there's just a number of developments that are occurring. Think about video redaction software that helps speed up the release of body-worn cameras. Think about video analytics that if I had to watch an hour of video, there are literally platforms of software available to me now where I just drop the video into the machine. I overlay software on it. I say all I'm interested in is witnesses said a red truck left this bank robbery. So give me any red trucks that go by this camera. Give me any red trucks that are exceeding the speed limit. Those are the only ones I want to look at. And now I've taken an hour in seconds to provide me with that data. So now as an investigator, in a couple minutes, I've very quickly gotten to all the red trucks instead of sitting here for an hour. And so the productivity gets better. Speech to text software. So back in the day when I started, you typed out your report on such and such date. I responded to such and such an address. Now it's speech to text. And so we're moving in that direction. So now troopers will plug in a mic. They'll use Nuance Dragon. They'll literally dictate, and they do it faster. The benefit of that is now they're back out on the road faster. You have an additional trooper that's out there visible, another trooper that's available to answer calls, another trooper that's available for backup. So again, another way that we're exploiting technology, trying to tie all of our data sources together and start to federate searches. So almost like Google for police, when I put in Chris Mason, I don't have to go to 20 different, I have to go to the firearms database to see if he's got a firearm. I have to go to this database to see if he's ever been involved in domestic. To go to this database to see if he has a driver's license. It federates it. It gives me everything back in one slick package and saves me a lot of time and effort, and maybe creates those investigative leads that further the case. So that's really where we're going with technology. It's an exciting, great new world, but it's a world that I think we have to proceed down that road very cautiously. And we want to do it in a thoughtful, very measured approach. We want to do it in a way that people understand what the police and what the government is using. So, does that answer the question?
Thoroughly.
Okay, next one is by Caitlin Walt. And she said, what do you do in order to ensure that gun safety is maintained when yourself and your children are out?
Thank you for the question. So when I think about that, again, I loop back to my mantra, training. So one of the massive responsibilities you have as a state trooper is that you're conferred a certain amount of authority that comes with dispatch. And the authority to deprive people of their liberty. And sadly, there are times where you're authorized to use force. Sometimes that force rises to, along a continuum, to deadly force. And so having troopers be proficient in the firearm is just one part of the equation. By being proficient, they know how to safely handle it. They know the rules. Again, we have policy and procedure that provides these expectations and sets the guidelines for troopers so that there's no questions. There are very basic tenets. For instance, the laser rule: never pretend there's a laser coming out the muzzle of your gun, and you never swing that across it. So, good discipline with the firearm, using it in a safe way, understanding, you're never handing over a loaded weapon. It's always unloaded. It's always locked up when it's not in use. It's locked up when it's at home. It's not in lock. It's in holster. These holsters are weapon retention holsters, so there's a trick to get the gun out. So we teach troopers defensive tactics, and part of that is the way to retain your weapon in the event that somebody tries to take it away from you and use it against you. So those are really the ways that we kind of try to enhance and enforce the safety around firearms. Of course, being proficient, knowing when to shoot, being able to put rounds on the target is important. You don't want them out in space. You're responsible for every one that leaves the gun. But probably the most important facet, the two most important facets that I see kind of in that realm are the decision-making that goes around it. Understanding what the use of force continuum is, and understanding when deadly force is required. And just because deadly force can be used doesn't mean it has to be used. And so teaching the troopers how to do that, and giving them instruction in that critical decision-making, and keep in mind, these are decisions that are being made in milliseconds oftentimes. That's all right at the core of firearm safety. Again, to loop this question back for the other question, you look at the new technologies that go with firearms. And you have red dot optics, so you're not relying on the traditional iron sights, so more accurate, you can develop your proficiency better. Flashlights that are now attached to the gun, so you have better acquisition of the target, better identification, which is critical. Right? You may not think that's a big thing, adding a flashlight to a gun, but when I can see that somebody's holding a cell phone instead of a firearm, that makes a big difference. And so adding all that technology to the firearms is part of that safety. And then, this is a little bit off of your question, but I think it's an important point to hit. With respect to firearm safety is dovetailing that with our officer wellness. So it's no secret that being in the law enforcement profession, you're exposed to some very ugly things. You're also exposed to, spoiler alert, some very beautiful things. You get to see the very worst of society, but you also get to see the very best of society. And I think seeing those two ends of the spectrum, at least for me personally in my career, has really given me a whole new appreciation for the world that we live in. And so I always try to dovetail officer. It's a difficult job. So you're going to see some very ugly, horrific events. You're going to be placed in some very stressful conditions. It's a challenging job. Make no mistake. And sometimes those challenges, sometimes that repeated trauma over and over and over will wear on a person, and you will suffer mental health consequences. You will have suicidal ideation. And so having a program that addresses that, gets out in front of that, and then recognizes that, which is something that law enforcement traditionally has not done. We've always been type A people, and we've always suck it up, pull yourself up on your bootstraps, and just get back out there, kid, and do it again. And so we've very much tried to change that culture. If a trooper, using an example, if a trooper goes to a traumatic rollover, maybe an infant's killed, we're not going to take that trooper and just say, okay, thanks for handling this accident. Just get back in your car and go back to work. I want the supervisor engaged with that person. I want them talking to that person. I want them, is that person fit for duty? And traditionally, unfit for duty has been a very bad, had a very negative connotation within the policing group. Again, rough and tough trooper, there's nothing that affects me. That's not true. Everything affects everyone. And I want supervisors engaged with our personnel as an officer wellness component to our job, and thinking, hey, this is a pretty traumatic event that this trooper just went through. buddy, why don't you put you out on fatigue time? I want you to go home. We're going to check in with you a couple hours from now. Are you in a good space? Are you in a moment? When you have those conversations, and again, when you start to trust and when you start to communicate, you start to open up those lines of communication, people will say, hey, you know what, Sarge, I'm not okay. I need a timeout. So it's appropriate to give them that timeout and get them back to where they need to be. Because we don't do the public any favors by sending a trooper that's been affected like that. We don't do the trooper any favors that way. And so really addressing officer awareness and thinking about officer suicide, which is an epidemic within our profession, I think really dovetails with firearms safety. So that's kind of why I bring it up. We haven't been immune to it. We've lost officers to suicide. It's a very difficult thing for the agency to go through. As you can imagine, for families to go through. It's not a fun thing. I had to do it as a colonel. It's probably one of the most least pleasant tasks that I've had to engage in. And again, an important one to get the agency kind of through a really rough period of time. Any other question?
Emily Fryer has a two-part question. Who do you look up to personally and professionally, and who or what encouraged you to step up to this position? Second question, what is something that you struggle with every day during this job, either mentally or physically?
So the person that I look up to, so kind of two.
Excuse me, Colonel?
Yeah.
The author, Emily?
Emily? So Emily, kind of the person that I had always kind of looked up to as I was coming up through ranks, and I started thinking, right around like the sergeant's position, now you start to focus, you're not just right out on the line, you're starting to think about developing your leadership skills. And so you have a responsibility, and that's to provide leadership out in the field. So when you get to a critical incident, you're in it. Welcome, you're on deck, and now you're in the batter's box, and you're starting to make the calls. So you need to start to develop your leadership skills. And so as I looked around and I started to read about leaders, about people that I admired and emulated, really Colin Powell, who just recently passed away, was kind of one of the guys that I looked at, and the things that impressed me about him was his ability to say, hey, I don't always get it right, but my heart's always in it. I thought, the care that he always demonstrated for the troops, the kind of even-keeled leadership that he provided through some very difficult times, was something that served the Army well, and I thought that he was a very effective leader. And then we saw that leadership in his military world translated well over to his political world. And so that was somebody that I kind of always thought and held in very high regard. So that's kind of as I go back. More recently, I had the good fortune to develop a very good relationship when I was the deputy superintendent, and then I became the superintendent of the state police with Commissioner Willie Gross at Boston PD. And so just an outstanding individual, great character, somebody really invested in his community, somebody at the street level, very engaged with his people, and so really a source of inspiration. So much so that the day that I got sworn in as the colonel, my very next, I literally left the State House and I drove to his office. He was the first person that I met with. And that relationship that we began to develop there certainly paid dividends. He already formed a cadet program that we're in the process of standing up now. A number of programs that Boston PD had already implemented successfully, we were able to kind of mimic. And then we also came together. Boston was going through a rough patch, so we were able to commit some more resources to the Youth Violence Strike Force and really develop a good relationship there. That blossomed into let's do some work together on human trafficking, and then of course we come together for a lot of the major events that are in Boston, the Esplanade, Marathon, almost all your large public gatherings, First Amendment gatherings occurs in Boston, something so we have a very good relationship. That relationship is very positive. His successor, which is Commissioner Graylaw. Those are kind of the two people that really have had an influence on me as a leader. The thing that I struggle with every day, I wouldn't say there's like a mental or physical struggle that I have every day. It's more the stress that this job brings to me is very much on staffing. So we are an agency that we recently had a staffing study that confirmed what we kind of intuitively already knew, was that we were way understaffed. Like I said, we run around 2,200 on any given day, sworn. The staffing study said we need to be at 2,600. So, you know, there's that delta of about 400 people. 400 troopers spread across the company. That's a lot of people. And the lack of those people, it has very real world implications. So when district attorney's offices call me and say, I need another homicide investigator, I need another person to fight child pornography within my county, I don't have those resources to give them. When our barracks are at minimum manning, we have minimum manning, it will shock you to know that typically a barracks is running at what we call a desk and two. So one trooper that's running the desk, and then two patrols that are out. So for maybe 100 miles, an 80-mile stretch of roadway, and all the ancillary roads, state roads there, you'll only have two troopers out there. We always run two, so that one has backup from the other. But I'm from the Cape, so the Yarmouth Barracks is my home barracks. So back in 1964, what do you think the minimum manning was at the Yarmouth Barracks? It was a desk and two. And here we are in 2021, and sad to say, the minimum manning is a desk and two. So I can literally have a patrol out in Provincetown, and then a patrol in Sandwich. And in Provincetown, the trooper calls for backup. That's a 45-minute ride. That trooper's all by themselves. We ride alone. So there's a lot of self-reliance and independence that are baked into troopers, but there are just times where you need backup. And so that is really where the partnerships that we have with the local departments comes into being. Frequently, it's more often that I'll be backed up on a road stop by a local officer than I will by a brother or sister trooper. So that staffing, that frustration, that's kind of the thing that gnaws at me every day. It makes it hard to really, how do I do this amount of work? That amount doesn't change. In fact, that amount generally expands with this fixed number of people. And so we're constantly in a battle to try and get new classes for the state police to get those funding. That's where I spend a lot of my time and effort, is trying to impart to the legislature the importance of full staffing. If you don't have full staffing, again, it has an officer wellness and a public safety implication. Because if we're at a desk and two, and then on day shift, and the eve shift is at a desk and two, and one of those people gets COVID, gets sick, is injured, and now they're at a desk and one, guess what? Congratulations, you're being held over to the next shift. And so troopers are routinely being forced to work another shift, so 16 hours. And so that's fine if that happens once or twice. But what do you think your kids say when you start missing baseball? What do you think your wife says, or your husband says when you stop, when you're working 16 hours every day? And what do you think that impact is on your sleep schedule, on your wellness? All those things have an impact. So it's something that we try to guard against, and it's why I'm always fighting for staff.
Ashley St. Louis, like, what has a do professionally, and so is there a significant number of women and people of color who must be recruited? And then the next one is, how are they recruited? And also, are troopers required to be
Unfortunately, Colonel, we have just hit the wall as far as time. I think it is safe to say that these were not cookie-cutter answers to good questions. As I have explained to you, and you're getting all of them. You're getting all 111 of them. And even if it's an occasional email, I will make sure to pass that on to all of them. Before you are dismissed,
Are you?
that is one day I'm not allowed to dismiss you. Before you all head off, Colonel, as a memento of your visit here to Leominster High School, we have a copy of the poster, the graphics, put together, and we hope that you will display this in HQ. Thank you on behalf of my students and my colleagues here at Leominster High School. We had Dr. Kaczynski in earlier, we had Mr. Bayshak, one of our assistant principals, Mr. Kind, another assistant principal. Thank you.